Thanks, everybody. Hopefully, I believe you can see the slide deck, which really is, as it says here, we're going to, a few colleagues and I are going to discuss what we're calling a manifesto of respectful, sustainable learning design. It has morphed a little bit over time and continues to morph. So this is very much a work in progress. We are really excited and honoured that you could join us today. And a big shout out to my colleagues who are joining me today, Tom, Kashmira, and Stephen and Meredith, and I'm sure they'll be able to introduce themselves in a couple of slides' time. So we'll kind of kick off a little bit, but it's great to have you here. Part of this work is very much about recognising and acknowledging that it doesn't, there's a history here. We acknowledge people who have come before us in terms of the work that they have done in this space. What we are proposing is not necessarily anything new. It's really just that it's a culmination and a way to start a conversation and hopefully some provocations around learning design and question some of the existing ways of working. But that doesn't mean that we are the ones who have come up with this. It's very much that other people have influenced this work, whether that's other people who have written in the space or conversations that we've had with people. It's not enough time to mention everybody today, but just to recognise that we are standing on the shoulders of giants, really. It's another acknowledgement that is, obviously a very separate piece to that is to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands, of country, of territories that we may be situated on. We recognise we're in a virtual space at the moment, including some of us who are in Australia, but some of us who are outside of Australia, and is from Canada, and so recognising that in Australia there are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples whose lands we are situated on, that is unceded land. There are other Inuit, Metis, other First Nations peoples across other lands and territories, where we may be situated. So we pay respects to them and to elders past and present, and their families and anyone who may be here today. Okay, I'm going to pass over to other people to quickly introduce themselves. Just to note that this is a collaboration and a piece where I've had conversations with other people, very much like Anne and Tom, and that has very much influenced some ideas around respectful learning design, sustainable learning design, and it started a real conversation and a collaboration around what happens in this space, what we would like to happen, what could the future look like, how do we start to give voice to some of our challenges and our hopes in the space, and just start to get, I guess, a broader recognition of the work that we all do, which is quite varied. So I might just flick it over to we might go alphabetically if that's all right, the same as at the start. So I might start with Tom. Did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Hi, I'm Tom Cotton from RMIT. I'm a senior learning designer there, but I've been hanging around in this space where the praxis of pedagogy and technology for about 30 years now. Inside learning design for past 7. I think that's enough, Kate. Handballing it on to the next.
Kashmira.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I'm lecturer in academic development at University of New England. So I'm in this space for quite a while. So just give you an idea from WebCity, if you remember those yellow folders. And since then, I'm in this space, so glad to be here.
Anne, did you want to?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Gagne. I use she, her pronouns. I am joining you from Canada, as Kate stated. I'm a senior educational developer, accessibility inclusion at Brock University. And I've been in higher education for about 20 years. I've worked as an instructional designer and now as an educational developer. And so I think the next person is Stephen.
Yeah, I was doing the alphabet as well. Hi, I'm Steve Grono from UNE, learning designer within our digital education team. Been likewise around here for a good decade now in different places. Meredith.
Hi, I'm Meredith from University of Melbourne, and I'm manager e-learning, e-teaching. I manage a little education technology team, and I'm very interested in these third space roles and how we all work together, particularly interested in the professional identity of the roles and how we can get a bit more visibility and valued for what we do, but particularly in how we all collaborate and work together. Kate.
Cool. And I'm Kate Witchell. I'm a senior learning designer at University of Melbourne. I move around a lot. I'm currently in an e-portfolio role, which I think also really influences my thinking at the moment because it is such a space that really crosses over with educational technology, pedagogy, policy, as well as kinds of other broader institutional challenges. And so I'm always kind of thinking about that. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Why manifesto? The time really now, I think, hopefully everybody is thinking about this and it'd be great to get your thoughts, and we have a Padlet for that. But over the last few years, there's really been a shift in terms of recognizing the fields we work in due to the pandemic, but also changing the nature of the work and increasing the workload and increasing some of the challenges that we are handling. And there's also just some real interesting tensions and contradictions in practice around what we say we do or want to do as inclusive practice versus what actually happens in practice. And so I think that a lot of these ideas that we're going to talk through today have always existed pre-pandemic. They're not new to the pandemic, but I think the pandemic has been a real kind of tipping point for just a lot of us in our roles, or at least for me personally, in terms of just recognizing the challenges that we're working within, the institutions and the kind of systems that we work within and around, and the need as well for just supporting community. So, and that's where we're really excited to be here with TELedvisors, which is a community space. So we'll keep kind of shifting this work, but hopefully you can see that. But yeah, it's I guess the main point here today, as far as an early start to a manifesto, is really just to provide a provocation of, especially in instances where often institutions tend to copy each other in the ways that they enact learning design work or educational technology projects, or the ways that we find ourselves caught in the ways that we build relationships with people or the kinds of team structures that we're in. They tend to all follow pretty similar formats, and there's a point where some of those things exist because that's the way they've been done, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way that they have to be done. And so there's a point where we can also just question, well, where does that premise come from, and do we want to hold on to that or not? In relation to that, I've started thinking about this idea of paths and desire lines and what it means in, that kind of intended practice and intended outcome versus what is the actual outcome in practice. So, we build these things in practice, but then people choose their own pathways through them sometimes, or they subvert processes, or they completely just get rid of things and decide to do their own thing. And that can be, courses that we build, or it can be things that are enacted on us as well if we're in learning design and educational technology spaces. So I just thought I'd kind of put this out there as this idea of, thinking about what are the legacies we leave behind, what are the, what kind of practices are we intending versus what happened in practice, and what are the kinds of things that maybe, often we have things enacted on us, but we are enacting things on other people as well, and we are also building, things in practice that, potentially have longevity or potentially have consequences for people we don't even necessarily see or think about. So that's, I guess, just, thinking about some of these principles and the way that we enact care and the way that we enact our practice. I kind of like this as a metaphor. So I'm going to hand it over to some other people who are going to do a better job of talking than I have. But essentially, the manifesto is really about respect for time, workload, and labour, respectful of being respectful of people, respectful of expertise, respectful of ethics and care, and respectful of context. And context is highlighted mostly just because, even though we're going to talk to it explicitly, it also really weaves into all of those principles, and so it's something that we will keep coming back to throughout. And I'm going to pass over in a minute to Meredith. It's just also to note that, and Steve, if you've got a chance to check that link in the chat, we have a Padlet wall where we'll be asking you to really ideally reflect on some of these principles and think about and discuss them in your own context. And so if you would like to add your thoughts and experiences to a communal Padlet, we really encourage you to. There's a link there, which Steve has put in the chat, and there's a QR code there if you are wanting to use your mobile. So I'll just give everybody a quick minute on that. And I'm going to flick it over to Meredith to discuss respect, being respectful of time, workload, and labour.
Thanks, Kate. So we recognise that labour in learning design is involved as part of the learning process that affects students, learners that we design for, and also the academic teaching staff that we're supporting. Changes to teaching practice, to curriculum, to structural design of a course and subject require a level of time, learning and consultation and readiness for change. And that needs to be recognised and accounted for within any change process. There's often a multiple level of change and cognitive load involved for all the staff that are involved. That covers the pedagogical change, technological change, teaching logistics change. And you can see here, this slide sort of illustrating that there are points at which we might feel that that a part of the process has been broken off, that we might be working in silos, and that we might be also hanging on and trying to connect processes together and join them back in, or hanging on even with a tightrope. Our own workload and self-care is important to ensure that we can make the work, time and scale and scope of the work visible, and that time is accurately reflected and aligned to workload. So workload should include time for care work and aspects of work related to relationships, to care, collaboration, testing, iteration, research and evaluation are also part of learning design work that may often be invisible work. So we recognise learning design is a collaborative activity, and mutual understanding of the labour and work involved is needed. Often there's a disconnect between workload, labour, time involved in different learning design processes, and that doesn't necessarily inform the resourcing needs of the teams involved. In my context, I'm from a very small faculty-based team, and we support 500 or really over 500 subject sites each semester across many disciplines, teaching modes and teaching delivery periods. And that means we need to be very intentional about our change processes, and they need to be sustainable in the long term for the intended outcome. The scale of the Canvas subjects in my context mean we incorporate depth and width in the design of our basic templates that are rolled out to all subject sites in the faculty. These templates were intentionally designed to support workload, to improve student experience and have longevity. So really able to be incorporated into our subject copy forward processes, looking forward into next semester and further afield. They were designed to promote good practice, to build capacity or capability with our academics. And we leveraged the templates developed by the central support area rather than reinventing the wheel. So for me, respect for time, workload and labour is really at the moment about our quality assurance processes and sustainability and how to enfold quality enhancements into our business as usual work. The quality assurance aspect is often one that sits behind the scenes and lacks visibility. And we shouldn't need to be required to justify this. How to get quality enhancements to stick and to carry forward. It's fine to go to the next slide, Kate. Thank you. It's really important to this being respectful of time, workload and labour. We have a capacity building mindset and we often look for the easy wins, including what things we can do behind the scenes to maintain that quality. This acknowledges that there may be quite small things also that, for instance, like the inclusion of an assessment overview page in our basic template, but that can make a significant difference to student experience. So it's not just the large scale design projects, it can be really quite small things that are involved as well in that concept of respect over time, workload and labour. I'm going to throw it back to you, Kate.
Thanks, Meredith. I'm actually going to throw straight to Tom Tom's taking respectful of people as our second principle.
Cool. Thank you, Meredith. That's loved it. I'm going to take a little bit of a step back and share how I've been conceptualizing learning design. And I was so grateful to receive this topic. Thank you, Kate, and the team members. Because at the heart of all learning design, it's people. It's as simple as that. And people are storytellers. And, as a learning designer, third space professional, I look to help academics strengthen their storytelling, to help them bring students into the narrative of their profession. And looking at the respect of people is simply giving space to each other to share their storytelling and their abilities for better and sustainable outcomes. So my story today is about how respect of people is a pillar of sustainable learning design. And the examples that I'm going to provide are from my own fumbles as I've been learning and deepening my understanding of learning design and value this as a profession. So there's many points that we can talk about here, and I really encourage you to throw your ideas as we talk through this presentation into that Padlet. But here I just want to share my top 3 that are personally impacted on my third space thinking. So they are respect for people's workflows in learning and teaching. The second one is respecting the teacher's ownership of the learning experience. And also, finally, and I think probably most importantly, respecting the people's voice in the learning experience. So let's start with the first one, respecting people's workflows in learning and teaching. So typically in a learning design session, you have to listen. You sit there for maybe the first 10 minutes. Being a counsellor, hearing the academics talk about the time pressures, the difficulty, the stresses, what's going on within the department and within the university. And you're really a part counsellor. So that is actually a big part of learning design, is listening. And through that process, I I realized that I was making a classic mistake of, creating these fantastic activities, but they were complex. And just through that listening process in those early parts of the design sessions, I really developed a strong sense of what they were facing, the complexities. And I started to build a greater sense of empathy for what it was like to be a teacher. So I simplified my approach. And in came the insight that actually learning design is not the widget, it's not the content, it's the workflow. It's the workflow of the student, it's the workflow of the academics, it's the workflow through to the academic, to the administrative teams who are, dealing with the marks, making sure the students get the results and testimonies, all those sorts of people. And so now I specifically design my learning activities around workflows. So if I can save academics time, that is a sign of success for me. And I think I've learned to respect the individuals and what they bring and what they need into the process. The second part is about respecting the teacher's ownership of the learning experience. So as I joined in the learning design gig at La Trobe University, and that was with Kate. And I think back to my first course that I worked on, and I go, oh my God, poor academic. And I'm so sorry. Actually, I'm still so sorry about the experience that I put her through. I was naively excited about, we can do this, and we should do this. Only later on, upon reflection, did I realize I was actually disempowering the academic. I was taking ownership of the course, of the materials. And to this day, I'm actually very careful about not taking over. So I seek to understand their vision and build that out as help them create their own course. So I've succeeded and have greater confidence in the sustainability of learning design if they feel ownership of their course. And I'm going to go through the respecting of the people's voice. The process, people are called to the work, and inclusion is nothing without access. So imagine being invited to a party and not being asked to dance. When we design learning experience without the voices of everyone who has a stake in this, we won't see the barriers to the learning. We don't create the impactful courses that we want to do. We force others to play catch up, and the students will miss out. So as learning designers, we do need to be advocates. When a voice is missing, we need to represent those voices. But in another sense, we shouldn't have to. It shouldn't just be normal. It should just be normal, because we want to create sustainable learning. So look, at the heart of all learning design is people. We're a bit of a weird profession. We don't hoard skills, we share them. And it makes us very valuable third-space professionals building learning communities. So when a learning designer asks for the involvement of people in the learning design process, please say, cool, how can I help? Because they know what they're doing, but not only that, why they're doing it. It's about people, about the respect for people, for sustainable learning design. I hope that's been useful. Going to kick on to the next. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Tom. I'm going to talk a little bit about respect for expertise and how we can show mutual respect. And I think that segues quite nicely from respect for people. And I guess for me, it's also recognizing that we are in a space, when we kind of talk about a manifesto for respectful learning design. It doesn't mean that it's only learning designers that take this on. You know, we're talking about all of our roles and the ways that we support a learning design process. And that's where, when we talk about expertise, you know, often, you know, the challenges are about, oh, well, maybe not getting validated in terms of our expertise, but we also need to, you know, it's often recognizing that that's a mutual thing, but then there's also recognizing the expertise of other third space roles. So it's not just about you know, a particular relationship with an academic. It's relating that to respect of expertise in terms of the other, you know, all of the people that we work with. So some of that really for me, I've been thinking about expertise versus service and the kind of tensions that that can bring, in that if we think about our roles as service roles, then it sort of assumes we are in service to someone instead of necessarily taking on our expertise at being able to shape those conversations. And so sometimes we end up enacting change instead of maybe being change agents in the way that we would like to be, while also being able to be in collaboration with someone. For me, as coming from a film background, it's often about working in really cohesive teams to come out with a shared outcome or a shared vision. And so, you know, often when we're doing this kind of work, we're collaborating, but it's done in sort of other ways that aren't always acknowledging the expertise that people bring, or having all of the people in the room and having people with clear roles and learning how to leverage those roles and that expertise as effectively as possible. So in my own experience, I think about, you know, how ways where that mutual respect for expertise has been really valuable. So, for example, when working with an academic from a First Nations background and coming in open enough and valuing their expertise and their lived experience as expertise, and them being open enough and valuing my expertise, really led to a very, very fruitful collaboration that saw some great outcomes from that. And that really meant then valuing each other's expertise, but also valuing the process and being open to the process, and not sticking too strongly to my own preconceived ideas about learning design, and being open to receive new ideas about that and starting from that premise. There's the other piece that I don't want to get too deep into, but just in terms of how do we recognize expertise as a profession, and how do we gain value or acknowledgement as a profession while also showing that we are professional. So I think a lot of us spend a lot of time kind of arguing and advocating to have space in the room, when ideally the work should just speak for itself. So how can we make sure the work speaks for itself? And how do we make sure that we're just modeling great expertise at every opportunity? Because I think in the end, I don't want to have to keep trying to explain what learning design is. I just want good examples of learning design, or good examples of relationship building, or good examples of, you know, where I've demonstrated my expertise, to be out there, and that to just be that people go, oh, well, that must be a sign of good learning design because I had these good experiences with these other people. So how do we as a profession make sure that that is ideally consistent and recognized and you know, supported through the space? Building that profession also means that we have to talk about what is expertise and what does that look like. And so I guess that's something to think about, is how do we do that? How do we demonstrate trust and respect of other people's expertise? How can we create more spaces for things like co-design and inclusive practice, especially to honour people's lived experiences expertise and make sure that that is valued and brought into a design process? how do we demonstrate our own expertise and and ensure a professional field and community, including how do we build the supports that we need to do that, whether that's community-wide here or whether that's within institutions and organisations, and how do we ensure evidence underpins our work, and what does that look like, and how do we do that when we are maybe not given the time and the support to do that. So that's what I'll leave, and I'd really encourage you to put some thoughts on the Padlet around that. I'm going to throw to Anne.
Thanks, Kate. So I'm going to talk a little bit about ethics and care, because these are both concepts that I weave in all of the work that I do. I am someone who does a lot of work on trauma-informed universal design for learning, and care and ethics are a pillar of that. And these are things that I've always built into my design practices and so on. I'm really going to emphasize some of the things that Meredith has already mentioned, that Tom has already mentioned, that Kate has already mentioned as well. Meredith talked a little bit about like, how do we make this work visible? And I think that one of the ways that we do make the work that we do visible is through those ethics. It's through those values that we bring to the space. It's through those collaborations, that co-design, that community. And Tom talked a little bit about workflows, and as someone who does a lot of work around accessibility, I think that it's really important for us to even think about workflows from a neurodivergent point of view, and think about how everyone's workflows are actually going to be a little bit different, whether that be from the subject matter expert point of view or even the learner's point of view. And so we really have to value that sort of lived experience that Kate was just talking about, the expertise that they will know some of those aspects. And so thank you, Steve, for putting the links in the slide. What I want to emphasize here is that it's important, if we want to think about respectful ethics and care, it's important to model what we want to see, right? So we want to model that act of respect. We want to model and acknowledge the fact that we bring our whole selves to spaces. So both as subject matter experts and as designers, and the learners as well. And there's a great article that just came out that talked about, that emotional weight of care that was a good read as well. So really trying to emphasize and model that respect in the work that we do, in the way that we design. And Tom alluded a little bit to that as well. And our ethics, of course, and we're going to talk about this, my colleagues will talk about this in a bit, all of this ethics is sort of modeled by our context, right? So I'm lucky enough that I'm joining you from Canada, if you couldn't tell from my lovely accent. And so my context is completely different than your context, right? And so the context that I've been working in has been different as well. But those instructional design principles are still there. They're informed by my individual ethics. They're informed by my institutional values, and in the values of the different institutions where I have worked over my 20-year career, right? And so I think that it's really important for us to think about that. And Meredith did a really good job to talk about the technology. And I think the technologies that we get to use in our different institutional spaces are also informed by those institutional values. What kind of learning management systems do we use? What kind of technologies do we have at our disposal? So ultimately, when we're thinking about what care comes into play when our design, is that we have to think about, taking care when we do design something, giving care. Tom talked a little bit about that too, when we talk with our subject matter experts, and really caring and active listening, but also being careful, which is something that Sarah Madoka-Curry has talked about in her dissertation. And it's like that intentionality piece, which we talk about a lot when we think about universal design for learning. And so before I leave it to my colleagues who are going to talk a little bit more about context, one of the things that I was reflecting on around care, and what I do often is I kind of look at the etymology of words. And it was really interesting to me that if you look at the etymology of care, that it comes from two different things that are kind of distinct, yet we do as designers, right? So care comes from the Old English, and has an aspect of anxiety and grief and sorrow. But it also comes from this idea of giving something serious attention. And so I guess my part of this manifesto is I want us to think about how, as designers, can we carry that grief, but also that attention at the same time and allow that to coexist. So that's my piece. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Anne. I'm going to, Kashmira and Steve are going to wrap up our final principle, discussing being respectful of context, and then we'll come back and invite a broader discussion with all of you. So Kashmira.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. So what I'm going to do is like all that you have heard so far is context, right? It's not something that is separate to context. So we have kind of like this was kind of like a reverse engineered designed presentation where we talked about nuances first before looking at the whole piece. So I remember one. I was thinking that's a very funny, Kate. I was remembering one of my interviews where I was being interviewed as for the instructional designer position, and they talked about best practices, and so I tried to mention that. Let's say if we are manufacturing a car and if we are picking up the pieces from different cars that are best, like best engine, best wheels, best windows and all of that, and we put together, it doesn't necessarily create a best car in the world, isn't it? Because they're all designed in a best way for that particular context. So what I'm kind of like trying to touch upon a little bit is next slide. A little bit broader ideas that wraps everything up that was so far told. So I'm also like try to bring your attention to broader consideration in the design when we are looking at the context is disciplinary differences. So something that worked for someone or some context not necessarily work for us or in our context. Also, as we talked about, like people involved and what is suitable for them, what they can easily absorb, those kind of things. So disciplinary differences matters a lot. Hidden curriculum is also another thing that we might want to consider, not that we consider it like very often, but from my own research, we saw that people, so when I spoke to the lecturers around their design, how they design tasks and why they design the way that they have, they told that, oh, we assume this and we assume this. So sometimes we don't, we have some learning outcome in our head, but we don't communicate. So, and also we think that because it is postgraduate or because this is this, it will be like this, that these are all assumption, and we try to achieve hidden curriculum or implicit learning outcomes that we have not really put in kind of like a very explicit way. So and also sometimes we have not explained the design rationale to our students and or the people involved. That also is something. So I'm wrapping that all up into kind of a framework that I have mentioned in my my research work. So can we go to the next slide, please? So I'm just presenting here is like a as learning designer, what we want to achieve is that alignment. So alignment between what is delivered as a task, what students eventually do as activity, and then what outcome they get. So that is like that black arrow line that I have shown in this diagram. But when we try to achieve that, we spoke about people, right? So they can, and we only spoke about like in design point of view, people like students and in the university, but students go outside. If we are looking at the end user, they go outside, sitting in the cafe, sometimes, and working on their projects. So it's all like their workmates, friends, and they might work in sort of clusters, so individually or in groups, teams, communities, and they influence their ideas as well. So task also could be like at a different level. So as I think Tom mentioned as well, that there could be like a small one. So like small task as like a small MCQ quiz, or a little bit bigger task as essay, whatever. And then those tasks are supported with the tools or artifacts or any other resource material that we want to use to be able to get that task done. Now, you can apply this to your course or a particular assessment task to maybe at a course or program or faculty level. And basically we are still doing the same thing. So we have a task of learning design or whatever, and then we ask people's help, we use tools, and we try to create something or do an activity that will get the outcome. So that's basically the application of such model. And we are trying to now, what came out of my research is that depending on how the task is delivered, so let's say semantics, that we sometimes don't pay attention to. So semantic is one of the things that can impact this alignment. And there are other things like how explicitly you have mentioned what you want to achieve, and also are you trying to achieve several things at a time, that impacts how these three things align, especially activity and outcome, because we are assuming, right, that okay, we designed this, academic will deliver this, and then students will learn this and they will get this. But that's not how it happens, because how the task is delivered impacts not 100%, because then people's background and context come into picture when they do or carry out that task. So that is also again a people factor in it, and that's why those inputs from, it's not just the task but also inputs from people and environment and tool that goes into what outcome we will achieve. So I think to wrap up all of this, Steve, would you just take from there and then just wrap up how we...
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Kashmira. I think that framework there that you've got on screen there is great. That array of many interacting and overlapping organizational contexts sets out that we're definitely not working in isolation, that a best solution isn't the same in all cases, but it's not necessarily just based alone on what's best for the learner or ourselves. And I'll expand on that. Combining Kashmira's car analogy and Kate's earlier one about paths, the much less research-based polished analogy looks something more like this, that sometimes the latest model or upgrade or trend doesn't always fit that need. Sometimes it doesn't matter how good the vendor demo is or the flashy new feature, when that's not what our end users need within their context, and that context matters. I'll give you the dot point version on the next slide of that. So within the shared space, that context matters for a best approach to take in order to have the most impact. So if best practice doesn't exist, I see good practice as that which aims to better the learning experience and that depth of engagement and connection for those involved. That if we consider things from that holistic point of view of thinking about the learner, the teacher, the content, and the task context for their needs, and for that ecosystem that we're all engaging within, then respect of context therefore leaves us with three imperatives, the way I see it. The first, that we're advocates in what we do. So within our designs, our projects, our day-to-day, especially but not limited to when we interact with those traditionalist mindsets, you've met them before, I imagine. We have that opportunity to advocate for both our teachers and our learners' needs within the space when they can't, and to consider those various needs and perspectives. Two, that we have agency within ourselves. We're also advocating for ourselves and our community as well. We've talked about respecting teacher roles with some of the previous contexts, but our role in context is also in collaborative design, and your own perspective and concerns matter within that for the sake of those user experience goals. There's a balance to find between sort of being perceived as that outsider coming in, or the one who's called in for that sort of seemingly menial task when something needs doing, and reflecting on that, how we're perceived as an interesting balance to find. And then finally, that point where they meet is about working with authenticity and empathy. And that's when we can have a real impact, the way I see it, in the endless scope of work that we can do within this role. Any time that we're sort of leaving it better than we found it, in a sense, means that you're 100% on that correct path. And then finally, on the last slide, by means of a bit of an outro, I wanted to thank everyone for their time today. I'll pass back to Kate shortly for facilitating any questions. But collectively, what that brings us to today is a manifesto for a space that's respective of time, workload, and labour, as Meredith outlined, sustainable within consideration to emotional labour involved, respectful for people, as Tom outlined, giving space for other stories and perspectives and input, respectful for expertise, bringing in shared values and goals and collaborative opportunities from Kate, respectful of ethics and care through modelled respectful design, through to sort of trauma-informed practice within learning design from Anne, and then respectful of context, that authentic design doesn't happen within the isolation, but within that greater ecosystem from Kashmira. So over to you, Kate.
Thank you. And I'm conscious there's only 10 minutes left, so we're going to open it up to other people. There are some links in the chat as well. So I might even bring up the Padlet now and just see what's been happening with the Padlet and encourage people to add to that both now and later. If anybody has any kind of burning questions or burning discussion points they wanted to add, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm going to chuck the Padlet link back in the chat again, but we welcome questions or comments or feedback at this point. Colin, have we missed anything in the chat? I had a quick look and it looked like there was some discussion, but I didn't see any questions.
I think, no, I think we've been largely across it. So I might just take this opportunity then to thank you all, because this has been a really fascinating kind of discussion covering a lot of the issues that we face and a lot of the work that we do. I would ask what you think the next steps are. How do we actually do something, meaningful?
Yeah, well, I know, and I'm hesitant to speak for the group, because even though we're a group, we all have kind of different perspectives in this space, and it's about then coexisting. But that's what I love. There is a plan to try and put out a more formal version of this, and that's in draft form at the moment. We didn't want to, it just wasn't quite ready yet, so that's where we've tried to summarize this and open it up for discussion. We're hoping to do some further research with it, or at the very least build some spaces where we can generate a DOI so that other people can continue to reference that manifesto when it's in a solid form. And so that way we've got ways to put it in Figshare and link other resources like the Padlet and allow for co-acknowledgement, both of other people building on that or people contributing, like today, if you want to put your name against any items that you've added, please feel free. So so that way we can at least start to collaboratively, even if it's outside of the normal publishing systems, build ways to acknowledge the work and build up the work and build a base. So that's at least a little bit of what we've been talking about as the next steps. But I guess ultimately we're hoping that people will start to rethink some of the things that they build in practice, and some of the ways that maybe projects get enacted, and whether those are doing what they intend to, and what sort of consequences they have, and also just, I guess, how do we as a community start to come together to build more opportunities to create shared value and shared practice, and build expertise within the sector, and build build community.
Awesome, Kate. Kate, look, I'm going to chip in. I see someone's posted on the respectful of people. And I just love the comment. Whoever put that there, it might have even been you, Kate. But what I love in these discussions is when people get to the nub of things. And I just love that comment. We are all people. It's connecting as people. And I thought that's a really nice level of getting to the simplest point, but no simpler of that. So thank you, whoever made that comment. I would also encourage people, if they heard today's presentation, if they've thought of any great themes that we haven't talked about today, please put that into the questions and comments column, and would love to explore that further, because I see this manifesto as a way of saying who we are as a third space professional, or as a profession, full stop. So, and not only is it advertising outwards to people saying, oh, this is what you get, this is the value that we bring, but it also creates that aspiration, that narrative for those people coming up into the field as well. So I feel, and a huge amount of gratitude to Kate for being the lightning rod of this, to really put voice, to put substance behind who are we as a third space professional. So thank you, /rant.
I might just add something very quickly that just popped into mind. I'm wondering if this might, in some ways, be an update or an addition to the Larnaca Declaration on Learning Design. Because I'm looking at that, and I'm just about to pop that into the Padlet. See, that's very much about the practice, but it's not about kind of the being and the doing sort of
The mindset.
things.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that it comes from, the Larnaca Declaration comes from a very theoretical sort of academic side of things, and perhaps we're bringing the heart and the practitioner side of things. Anyway, just a general suggestion.
Yeah, and there's already so many learning design frameworks out there. Do you know what I mean? Like, at this point, it was about trying to do something a bit broader, like you mentioned, Colin. So, yeah, and I wanted to thank all of my collaborators, and especially Anne, who's joining us from Canada at like 10 o'clock, now 11 o'clock at night. So
It's worth it.
Thank you so much, everybody. I think we're happy to stick around for a few minutes if people want to have a chat further. And there's lots of amazing stuff on the Padlet, and I'll also add the links to the resources that we've mentioned in the PowerPoint on the Padlet, just so people have a couple of ways to engage there if they want to then interact. But they are in the references section in the PowerPoint, and there should be a link in the chat. And we'll send that around as well, so Colin can always send an update, and we can put it in the TELedvisors teams area. So really just really want to thank everybody for joining us and interacting and giving up your time.